Yo, I can't hear. Like
Everyone's muted except me. Everyone's muted except me. Yo, this won't go live.
You're live. You're live. You're live.
Oh. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another segment of the Cold Front Report. And tonight we're going to be talking about what the Bills should be doing with their cornerback 2 position. We'll be right back. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another segment of the Cold Front Report. I got my teammates on with me, Mr. NFL pedigree himself, James Mallory. Mal, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. I'm ready to get started tonight. I'm excited about this topic, y'all. Let's get it.
Mr. Jeremy Turner Montgomery, it's a pleasure as always, my friend.
Hey, what's going on? Glad to be on. Let's talk some DB2 and see what everybody got to say.
EJ Daniels will be joining us shortly. He was having connectivity issues, but let's get right into it, guys. Cornerback 2. The Bills have had a solidified number 1 cornerback, and they re-signed him last season in Tre'Davious White. So Bill's CB1 spot has been locked up ever since 2017, since Trey was drafted to the Bills. But since then, they've had a fluctuation with different players. They've tried different things. One player in particular that has stuck is Levi Wallace. Levi Wallace is going to be competing this season for that cornerback 2 spot again. He's been competing for the last couple of seasons. James, what do you think Levi Wallace is going to bring to the defensive backfield for the Bills in 2021?
I think one thing that people overlook is just his experience and knowledge of the system. I mean, he's been in the system going into his 4th season. I think you can't overlook that. I mean, he has had solid play. Has he been a stud, Pro Bowler, somebody who's going to look and say he's going to lock down that side? No. Has he been a consistent starter? Absolutely. We can do a lot worse than Levi Wallace. Let's be real here. In the years, we've seen a lot worse than Levi Wallace. I mean, we've shown we can win. We've been to a couple playoffs with Levi Wallace starting at cornerback. So, I like him personally. Like I said, it's a lot worse we can do than Levi Wallace.
Right. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on Levi?
I'm fine with Levi Wallace. I mean, like I said, could we upgrade? Absolutely. But we also have to realize that the grass is not always greener on the other side. I think when you look at the 2 teams that just played in the Super Bowl, both of those teams had cornerback issues at some point last season. And if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be the measuring stick to the Buffalo Bills, they haven't had consistent cornerback play in almost this entire run with Pat Mahomes. Their number 2 cornerback spot has been a complete rotation at all times, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that people put too much responsibility on it without actually understanding what type of defensive scheme we run. And don't get me wrong, I like I said, it can be upgraded, but just like everything on the football field, it can be upgraded. So I just think that people put too much of an onus on it, especially when we play zone. Probably I'd say maybe 70, 80% of the time, cover 3, cover 4 zone. So I think people put a little bit too much, invest too much thought into it.
Yeah, Levi, he's been a serviceable corner for this team ever since that 6-game stretch in his rookie season in 2018. He really showed and flashed his potential as to what he could bring to the table at that spot. And ever since, he's never really exceeded that, and he's never, I wouldn't say he's let us down in that regard either. Levi Wallace is who Levi Wallace is. He's limited athletically. He's not going to match up well with the best of wide receivers. He's not going to match up well with athletic specimens or big guys, and we've seen teams target Levi Wallace in certain games, and the mismatch has been an issue at certain points in times. But as Jeremy alluded to in his previous point, that the Bills have kind of gotten away with having a weaker cornerback too for the last couple of years, and they do run a primarily zone-based scheme. So the Bills, Levi Wallace, he has been serviceable, and he has done what he's needed to do for the Bills so far in his Bills career. I anticipate that he's going to compete for that cornerback 2 spot. I think, he may have the upper hand on Dane Jackson, considering he's been a starter or a part-time starter for the last 2 seasons. And there's been a reason why he's held down that position for so long. He beat out a guy like Kevin Johnson. He still earned half the reps that season. Last year, he earned most of the reps at cornerback 2 after Josh Norman suffered a hamstring injury and he was out for the beginning of the season. Levi Wallace, he is a serviceable corner. I'm excited to see what he could bring to the table. I'm not really anticipating him to make any sort of leap at this point in his NFL career by any means. But to say that he is a bum, I wouldn't go as far as to say that. I think he is definitely going to be a part of the mix for the Bills there in their defensive backfield. JTM, what do you really think? Do you think the Bills are going to potentially have a rotation going on there as we've seen in years past, or do you think they're going to look to go to one guy, or they really do like having a lot of guys back there that they can play and tool around with in their defensive backfield, having 2 defensive-minded coaches or defensive back-minded coaches in Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott?
Well, I'd say that when you use the word rotation with Sean McDermott, it's always possible. Hell, we rotated defensive ends. 8 of them. We've rotated right tackles. We've rotated tight ends. We've rotated cornerback 2 in the middle of games as if this is a college system. So, yeah, I think a rotation is very possible. Hell, we may even rotate middle linebackers next year. I don't know. Who knows? But, I would say as far as rotating goes, I think they want somebody to win this battle this year. I think the only reason we rotated last year was because obviously I think Josh Norman was going to be your starter, but then he went down. But when he came back healthy, Levi Wallace did not play bad enough to necessarily lose his spot. And Josh Norman did not necessarily play good enough to take the spot. So you got the best of both worlds. And it kind of worked because they both brought something different to the table. Josh Norman being a little bit more physical, a little bit more heady, being that veteran in the league for as long as he's been, where Levi Wallace is obviously more athletically inclined. I think at the end of the day, he's a little bit lankier, he's definitely faster than what Norman is at this point in time. And I think when you get certain receiver matchups, he was a better fit. But I don't think you're going to be able to do that this year. You got two young players right there currently with Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace, and you want somebody to come on top.
Yeah, I think somebody coming out on top is going to speak volumes. I think really the differing factor in this is going to be how well either of these players have developed in this offseason. James, what do you think Levi Wallace could have done this past offseason to have given him the upper hand in this cornerback 2 competition going into training camp?
My main thing with him, where he really struggled with, is physical wide receivers because he's just so thin. I mean, he played at like 170 pounds. I mean, let's be real here. You go to jam a 205, 210-pound receiver, you're 170 pounds. I mean, you're just not going to win. And it's not like he was a weight room guy where he was a strong guy. He's just lean. No, he's not very strong, and he's thin. So when you get a bigger wide receiver, it's going to cause fits for him. Now, if you get somebody who's more shiftier and, more of a speed guy, okay, he'll fit there. He's a lot more comfortable in those type of situations. If you go back and look at the film, he's a lot more comfortable in those situations. Now, when we had Josh Norman last year, he was a lot more comfortable with the physical wide receivers. So it worked, but Levi Wallace, I mean, he got to go hit the gym. I mean, naturally, he may just not be a big dude. May just be a very difficult for him to put weight on. So I would say you need to work on his strength, being able to, hold his own against those more physical wide receivers, because what they're going to do, teams are going to, if they do see he's a starter, they're going to put him in situations where he's going to have to fight. And that can create a problem in a lot of situations. So, let's hope he went and hit the weight room pretty hard, or else, we'll see matchups when we have the bigger physical receivers. They'll give Levi Wallace some problems.
To kind of go off your point there, that's kind of been his athletic profile really for as long as I can remember. I remember reading about him going into Alabama and being a walk-on and just going in there and starting. And he's never really been an athletic specimen. He's always been a skinnier built guy, not the fastest guy, tall, long arms, lanky, not necessarily what, you look for in a cornerback. But then again, there's a reason why he was an undrafted free agent. And there's also a reason why he's stuck on this roster, and he's stuck in the depth chart, and he's stuck in the competition for as long as he has. And, he has that underdog mentality. I believe that has taken him as far as it has so far. And I think that's really why, he's found himself in the position that he's still in, competing for that cornerback 2 spot. And the other person he's competing with being Dane Jackson, also a 7th round draft pick, 2 guys that, weren't really highly touted college prospects. Dane Jackson being a guy who was a 7th round pick. And, he showed flashes in his limited action last season. He only had action in 2 games against the Jets and the Cardinals. And that was really it. The Bills didn't really use him all that much. They didn't utilize him. It kind of appeared as if they were developing him behind the scenes. James, what do you really think that we could be looking for in Dane Jackson come this season?
I mean, he could be a baller. Sometimes guys need that year to really get their feet wet, be groomed. I mean, let's be real here. If you're on the practice squad or you're, a corner deep on the depth chart, every day he's competing against John Brown. He's competing against Cole Beasley. He's competing against Stephon Diggs. So that dude is getting better in practice. People fail to realize that just because he wasn't playing last year, he had a game day 4 days a week in practice when he was trying to cover Stephon Diggs. He's covering Gabe Davis. He's covering John Brown. He's covering these dudes daily. So those guys, I mean, they really can advance when they, really dig in and they're practicing against these guys daily. So he may be ready to roll. People just look at it like, oh, he didn't get any game action. I mean, but we had a hell of a receiving core that he was practicing against daily that really could have prepared him to be ready to maybe take over that cornerback 2 role. We'll see. I think he can be. I think he has some ability. I wouldn't be against it. Look where McDermott and Bain found Josh Norman. 5th round?
Yes, like 5th, 6th round, around there. I mean, I guess for me, when it comes to Dane Jackson, the few times we saw him, it was really good, right? We saw him very limited action, but it was good. This reminds me exactly of how we found Levi Wallace. We saw him in the very limited space at the end of a season that we were out of playoff race. Guys were fighting for pretty much future contracts, if you want to call it the future signings. And he played very well. And we assumed that at that moment, we had a number 2 corner and a cheap number 2 corner for the next 6-7 years to go along with Trey White. And some people have not been impressed with the play of Levi Wallace. Me personally, I've been fine with it. I just think that as I said again, I think people look for too much from that position in this type of defense. And I think that sometimes we get hinged in the fact that we want an all-pro at every single position on the field at all times. You want all 11 players to be all-pros. It just doesn't work that way. And I go back to the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't have 2 stud corners. They had a very good nickel, but they didn't have 2 studs. Tampa Bay, their secondary was awful in the first half of the season. They got better as the year went along. And like I said, both of those 2 teams played for Super Bowl. I can also go back to the years of Reeves and Cromartie. How many Super Bowls did they win? How many did they go to? 0. So I would argue the fact that how important is CB number 2?
That's a good question. You know, we haven't really seen the Bills prioritize the CB2 position ever since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane came to town. I mean, they made moves such as signing Vontae Davis. They've made various moves. EJ Gaines about 8 times or so. They've made efforts, but they've never gone out of their way to make that big time splash for a corner opposite Trey White to quote unquote lock up the secondary. Some guy that, you know, is a highly touted player like a Richard Sherman, who we're going to talk about in a minute. They haven't really brought in any player of that caliber, which kind of shows their faith in their ability to coach guys up, bring them into their system, teach them up, and, you know, take the skills that they have, take the knowledge that they have, and go from there. And, you know, that kind of speaks volumes as to the kind of player Dane Jackson is, because that's exactly who he is. You know, he's a player that came out of Pitt who runs a very similar system to that of the Bills in the secondary, which is why, you know, you kind of saw him translate. And when he got limited action, you know, he was a baller. He was played well. You know, there's a rep where he did extremely well on a back shoulder fade to DeAndre Hopkins in the end zone against the Cardinals. And he broke that right up. You know, he's a kid with a lot of potential. He's a guy who the Bills are really kind of hoping to mold into a player that could be opposite Trey White. And if he's a diamond in the rough, and he's a cornerback too that, you know, maybe isn't to the quality of Levi Wallace, but, you know, almost there, if not better, he has the potential to be some player in this defense, to be that guy for the Bills. And personally, I think he has a hell of a shot to earn that spot for the Bills in this upcoming training camp. Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, you know, really, I'm not really sure. JT, who do you think has the upper hand in this battle coming into training camp?
I would love to say it should be Levi Wallace, hands down. And I'd love to say Levi Wallace, but to me, it seems that when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane starts talking about a player, especially in the offseason, that they, as I like to say, they become enamored with, that player always seems to have an upper hand. And I would say in this scenario, although it should be Levi Wallace, because I question the fact, if Levi Wallace is so bad, we need to upgrade that bad. How many games has Levi Wallace costed that we can think off the top of our head? How many games was he dominated in by where he just like literally got handed to him? Besides the Alshon Jeffrey Philadelphia Eagle game a couple years back, I can't think any outside of that. So I would have to say it should be Levi Wallace with the upper hand. What I think is Dane Jackson at this point. I think that the Bills coaching staff is enamored. I think they're looking to give him the shot, and for whatever reason, maybe it could be working. I think, James, you can speak to this more by being in NFL practice field, NFL facilities. Aaron Donald just complimented this guy on his work ethic and how hard he works. So that must catch it. He must be working that same way at One Bills Drive, and that must catch the coaching staff attention. So I would assume that's Dane Jackson at this point.
Excuse me. What are you thinking, Mel?
It's difficult. I think Levi Wallace, but I'm at the side with JT. I think Dane Jackson gonna be a guy. I think he's going to be the guy. To be honest with you, I think Levi Wallace is trade bait. You can't tell me we can't get a 6th or 7th round pick for him. Any pick we would get for him is gravy when we signed him as an undrafted free agent. There are a lot of teams in the NFL that would love to have him as their number 2 corner. I think you go through training camp. I think he's trade bait. Then, you look and see what Dane Jackson can do. They might be jumping ahead a little bit. Hey, you look to bring a veteran in to maybe back him up if they're willing to take that role. I just think Dane Jackson going to be the guy. I don't know. I have a hunch about it. I think he's going to be the guy unless Levi Wallace comes and just ball out. And I think he is who he is. I don't think he's going to get much better in his career, and I don't think he's going to be much worse. He's going to be a serviceable starter. You could plug him in. He's not going to lose you games. He's going to do his job, not too many mental errors, and that's just him. That's who he is. And I think Dane Jackson is going to have the upper hand because he's a playmaker, and I don't look at Levi Wallace really as a playmaker. I look at him as a solid starting corner.
Right. And, to the extent of how content it appears that the Bills front office is with Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace being the 2 competing guys for that cornerback 2 spot, all they did was draft 2 developmental cornerbacks behind these guys. They didn't draft or sign anybody to bring in and unseat either of these players, at least yet. They haven't done anything that would be indicative of, well, we don't really trust what we have there at this point in time. The only corner that they were rumored to be interested in is TJ Carey, who is about the same level of player as Levi Wallace or Dane Jackson at this point. So I tend to agree with both of you guys, whereas, the Bills being enamored with a type player, I really agree with Jeremy when he talks about how the Bills are speaking up on their players, because we've seen that come to fruition a lot of times in the past. We've seen it happen with Cody Ford. We've seen it happen with countless players. But Mallory kind of he kind of alluded to potentially the Bills bringing in a veteran in training camp, because right now we're just going through OTAs and players are just going through motions. This isn't really the time of the season where veteran players are signing on to teams because they don't really want to go to off-season team activities. And Jeremy kind of brought this up to me earlier, put it in my head, and I really, I kind of got enamored with this idea because it sounded fairly realistic, something like the Buffalo Bills would do. What if the Bills were to bring back Josh Norman in this season, come training camp, to be a competitor, be that veteran behind whoever it is that wins that cornerback 2 spot, to solidify their cornerback room and potentially, move whoever lost that battle? James, what do you think?
Me personally, I think it's something that's already been discussed and basically would almost be a done deal if certain circumstances unfold. I mean, for me, I think the scenario will be, hey, you start, if you start Dane Jackson, if Josh Norman is okay, we're coming in taking that backup mentor role. And if Dane's struggling, hey, you go to Josh Norman. He's more than capable of starting, and you trade Levi Wallace. It just makes sense to me. It makes sense in the locker room. It makes sense on the field. I mean, they loved him last year. He immediately came here and jumped into doing things for the community. And that when people do that, they intend on being somewhere for a while. So, I mean, obviously he's at the end of his career, but you get what I'm saying. If he comes in and he's able to play behind Dane Jackson, be the mentor, I think it would be a great, great, great thing and look to trade Levi. I don't think it happens until a week or 2 in the training camp, but I would love to have Josh Norman back. Even if we had to start him, I would love it. I'm not against it.
JT, put this bug in my head. What are you thinking?
So there's only one scenario where Josh Norman would be brought back to Buffalo. And I'm not against it, mind you, but there's only one scenario I can see it happening. You get to camp and Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, and Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis are eating these 2 guys' food. If they both look bad, then I think you're going to look into bringing Josh Norman. If Dane Jackson's looking bad and Levi's looking fine, you're going to stay pat. You're going to stay pat. And the reason you're going to stay pat is because you say, okay, Dane was a 7th-round pick. Levi's been starting. He has starting experience. We can allow Dane to develop a little bit more. If Levi is struggling, then you have to consider bringing Josh in because, as James alluded to earlier, he then becomes trade bait. He's on a 1-year deal. You're probably not going to he's not going to take another 1-year deal from this team after this season. And Buffalo is not going to give him another 1-year deal. It's just not practical business practice for a player who's not over 30 years old. So it's just not going to happen. If the Bills were to bring Josh Norman back, I'm okay. I'm okay with it, but I don't see it happening until week 2 of the preseason, possibly. That seems like the adequate time to bring him back, because obviously we know from his exit interview comments, he thinks he can be a full-time starter in this league, and I don't think he's just going to sign up again for rotation. Not saying he won't be willing to do it. He's just not going to sign up for it again.
Yeah, I really want Josh Norman to return for the Bills secondary in 2021. And it's really because of the veteran leadership, the competitiveness, the physicality, that mentality that he brings to that field. He gives everybody on that defense a little extra edge. He gives them a little extra swagger. Personally, that's something I love seeing in a football team. I love seeing it in the defense. You're flying around, you're playing physical, you're having fun. That's the sign of a defense that's confident in what they're doing, and they're out there doing what they're supposed to do and doing their jobs correctly. And I think Josh Norman is nothing but part of the efforts that the Bills are trying to do. He is nothing but part of the solution. I think that the Bills secondary is better with Josh Norman. He doesn't even necessarily have to be on the field. The presence that he has in that locker room speaks volumes to what he can bring to a football team. I don't think he's a necessity to this football team, but I don't think you're hurting your team at all by having Josh Norman on this team. I really hope to see them bring him back, and both of you guys thinking that they may or they will, that's indicative of me of a potential future for Josh Norman in Buffalo. And the last veteran I want to really talk about, and it's a player that, I kind of got hitched on this idea midway through last season when it looked like Sherman was on his way out with the 49ers, and, potentially bringing Richard Sherman to Buffalo. That to me, I think it's an extremely good fit. Maybe not financially. Maybe it's not the best fit for the cap. Maybe it's not the best fit for Richard Sherman's wallet, but it certainly would be that Super Bowl-esque move. It really kind of has that aura about it if they were to bring Richard Sherman into the secondary, to pair with Tre'Davious White, to put in front of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. That's a really good secondary to go into the season with, and I think it kind of changes the defense a little bit. JT, what do you think of potentially bringing Richard Sherman to the Bills?
So I spoke on this around the free agency time period when it was being rumored that Richard Sherman may be interested in Buffalo, and Buffalo may be interested in Richard Sherman. I was for it then, and I'm still for it now. I think that he brings a championship pedigree, and I think it's very important to have players, especially when you're trying to get to a championship, that has a championship pedigree. It'd be different if Buffalo had been to a Super Bowl or two or things as such, where you're bringing somebody in, you're saying, I'm going to show you the way. If you tell me that Richard Sherman has nothing to offer this team, even at his age, I think you're insane. Because when you think about the scheme fit, and everything goes back to scheme fit, right? We're not asking Richard Sherman to check Tyreek Hill on the island if he was here. That's not what we're asking him to do. We play cover 3 and cover 4 zone 70% of the time. That's what we're in. That's our base, essentially. Richard Sherman is still, if not the best, one of the top, definitely in the top 5 of zone cornerbacks in this league. And anybody knows anything about zone and man cover corners? Zone corners can play forever. Man cover corners, as we see in Patrick Peterson, Arizona, when you lose a step, you start looking real bad. It's a bad day on the job. It's like a Tuesday at a grocery store on a senior day. You're just getting ran over, get hit with mark carts everywhere. It's just volatile. But zone corners, your speed can drop from literally coming into the league a 4.55, and you can possibly get to a 4.65 and still be okay because you know how to command your zone. So I would not be against it, but the issue is this: it comes down to money. And one of the reasons that the Bills are being frugal at the number 2 cornerback position, because cornerback is an expensive position. There's 4 really expensive positions in the league. There's quarterback, there's the defensive end, there's left tackle, and then there's cornerback. You can pay 2 if you want to, but it doesn't usually bode well.
Yeah, the Bills, they're one of the 5 highest teams in the league in terms of how much cap they have accounted for them in the upcoming season, not just this year, but the upcoming one as well. So they don't really have a lot of money to play around with, and that's kind of why that's really why I think Richard Sherman isn't a Buffalo Bill at this very moment. I think if it were just based on schematics, just based on culture, just based on all of those things, it'd make more than enough sense for Richard Sherman to be a Buffalo Bill at this very moment. Mal, what are you thinking of Sherman potentially coming to the Bills?
I'm not for it. If we're gonna bring in a veteran, I'm just gonna say let's roll again with Josh Norman. I've seen some play, excuse me, from Sherman the last couple of seasons. I'm just like, ooh, that really just didn't sit well with me. And I'm not saying he's a bad football player. I'm not at all. If we signed him, I wouldn't be mad. It's not one of those situations. But if we're looking to bring in a veteran, I'm saying we roll with Josh Norman again. I think it's still something there. But Richard Sherman could play. Like JT said, we're in zone 70, 80% of the time. He could still come in and produce at a high level for us, and we can win the Super Bowl with him at corner. Definitely. But I'm just, me personally, it's not really personal for Richard Sherman. I'm just very comfortable with Josh Norman, been there for the year. If we're going to go get a veteran, let's go get somebody that's been in the system for a year, and let's roll with that. I'm big on chemistry, especially at this point in time. If he's not going to be at OTAs, not going to be a mini camp, go miss a week or two of training camp, bring somebody that's been around before. Don't bring in new blood. That's just my opinion.
I tend to agree with you in the sense of, he is a veteran in this league. And really what kind of intrigued me in potentially the Bills bringing Richard Sherman into to be in their defensive backfield is, the quarters defense that they've kind of really transitioned to over the last couple of years, really since, you've seen the spread offenses really kind of take over the league. Ever since that's really kind of been the transition of offenses, you've also seen the transition of defenses go to these more 4 quarters types looks, as the Bills have in the last couple of years facing the Chiefs and teams of that nature. And Richard Sherman, that's his blood. That's what he is. He was brought into the league to do. That's what he was brought into the league, and he does well for, or does well with. And that's really what kind of intrigued me into the potential fit. But I agree with you, Mal, that not having him in there right now at OTAs, not having, it's just speculation at this point. There's nothing indicative at this very second that Richard Sherman's going to sign anywhere, let alone with the Buffalo Bills. But this position, there's been a lot of polarizing opinions. There's been a lot of people that think, the Bills should have drafted a corner in the first round. The Bills should sign Richard Sherman for $10 million. There's a lot of differing opinions as to where people feel, where they stand as to how the Bills should address this position or how they should have addressed this position. James, do you think the Bills adequately address the position? Are you comfortable with where the Bills currently stand at the cornerback 2 position going into 2021? I'm
very comfortable. We can win the Super Bowl with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, point blank, period. That's what it's about. Can we win with who's at that position? We've proven that we can. Let's do it again. I'm very comfortable. I just think, overall at that position you still rolling the dice. When there's somebody come in and just don't fit the scheme right. Everybody say, draft a corner first round. 55% of first round picks are bust. Let's be real here. Just because you draft somebody in the first or second round don't mean that they can play. You draft in the first or second round, it's all about potential. They may be a bum. Sometimes you gotta be careful what you wish for. But I'm very comfortable with what we have at cornerback 2. Let's roll it out. Let's see what happens.
JT, how you feeling?
James giving me D. Milliner vibes there with the 55% Milliner Island. And no one has still found the island, even though where the hell it even went. But you're definitely right about there, about the drafting the cornerback in the first round. So this is my issue with, I guess, the fandom and the negativity towards the number 2 cornerback position. And this is more of a Venn diagram thing, I guess, if you want to call it that. If you have problems with your pass rush, you're then in tune probably going to have problems with your pass coverage. Buffalo indeed had problems with their pass rush, so at times they had problems with their pass coverage. So what did you do? You're either going to prioritize the pass coverage or you're going to prioritize the pass rush. Well, the pass rush comes before the pass coverage because in tune, when the quarterback says hike, the defensive lineman sticks his arms up and he touches the offensive lineman in front of him. If he doesn't get to the quarterback within 4 to 5, maybe even 6 seconds, that guy behind him can't cover. So they address the pass rush, right? We drafted Basham. We drafted Rosu. We're getting Big 98, who is not in camp yet, back. Correct?
We think
we're getting him back supposedly. You know, people are comfortable with Jerry Hughes. We got Mario Addison back in the second year. So you went and you addressed the pass rush. Therefore, the pass coverage should be better if your pass rush is better. So if you ask me my comfort level, I'm fine. We went to 2 playoff games with Levi Wallace, and we were fine. We were 1 game from the Super Bowl with Levi Wallace, and we were fine. And when I go back and watch that tape of the game, I don't say, hey, Levi Wallace gave up this. Levi Wallace gave up. I don't even remember what Levi Wallace gave up. All I really can remember was Levi Wallace wasn't the problem. Travis Kelce ate the middle of our defense up all game. So if you ask me, I think we can get to Super Bowl with Levi Wallace if the Kansas City Chiefs can get to Super Bowl with Rashad Breeland, who I think is worse than Levi Wallace. And overall, one of the worst starting cornerbacks in all of football. This is what I think. I'm sorry
I cut you off there, but you know, I had a similar feeling coming into this offseason was, you know, if the Bills are going to correct what their problems that existed on defense from last year, they were either going to get a big time corner or they were going to add pass rushers, and they were going to get tools in their tool belt for that defensive line. And you know, they chose to get the pass rush, and I was really happy they did, because you can sign Richard Sherman, and he could still, you know, you could still have a bad pass rush and guys back there that you know nobody can cover for that long. It doesn't matter how much you're paying them. Trey White can't cover guys for 7-8 seconds at a time if nobody's getting to the quarterback or the quarterback's not getting moved off his spot. So the Bills kind of brought this defense back to what it's predicated on, and having the 4-man rush that can get to the quarterback, that can get into his face, that can, you know, these cornerbacks can benefit from. That's what this defense is predicated on. That's what it's built around, is having a defensive line that can win their matchups, that can maintain their gaps and can maintain their rush and get in the quarterback's face in a timely manner. So to draft Gregory Rousseau in the first round, to draft Carlos Basham in the second, and bring back all the players that they had last season minus Quentin Jefferson, you know, this is going to be a defensive line that, you know, we're doing a lot of projecting on, but has a lot of potential to be much, much better than it was last season. And that's exactly what this defense needs if they hope to see better production from their defensive backfield, better production from their pass coverage. And, you know, this defense, you know, it doesn't work if one facet of it isn't capable of doing their job. You think of what they do on defense, you think of how they run. They really run primarily nickel sets, and they have 2 linebackers out there. And, you know, they haven't paid both of them. They paid Matt Milano, and Tremaine Edmonds they picked up Tremaine Edmonds' fifth-year option. And, you know, they invested a lot into that defensive line in the last couple of years, the highest paid defensive line in football. And, you know, they re-signed Trey White. They put a lot into the defensive side of the ball really in the last 2 seasons primarily. And I think this is the season where you really see that come to fruition. If you don't see it come to fruition in the first half of the season, maybe more so in the second half of the season, as they work those young guys in and figure out where they're best suited to play in this defensive line, where they're best suited in the rotation and what have you. So I think the Bills defense, it's not a matter for me as to comfort with Levi Wallace or Dane Jackson. I think both of those guys are going to go into camp, and whoever is the best player is going to win that battle, and they're going to be expected to do their job as if the other one would be too. So I think this defense, where you're going to see the improvement, is going to be the pass rush, and as a result, you're going to see improvement on the back end as well.
I want to give a couple stats here for Levi Wallace, for those that are saying Levi Wallace couldn't cover, because that's absolutely not true. And I'm going to tell you something like this. When you have a cornerback, a Trey White, who's somewhat agrees a top 3, some will say a top 5, some will say top 7, whatever. He's one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. That cornerback across from him is always going to seem like he get picked on, because quarterbacks are going to stay away from the number 1 CB when they play at an elite level. When Darrell Reese, when Antonio Cromartie, after what did they say about Cromartie? Oh, they pick at Cromartie. Of course they're going to throw at Cromartie, because they're not going to throw at Revis. So you're going to get more. You're naturally going to have more targets your way. You're naturally probably going to give up more catches, because that's the side of it they're going to go on. So I'm going to give you some stats here, okay? From 2019, Levi Wallace's mixed tackle rate was 13.6%. Didn't have a great year. That dropped to 5.9% in 2020. In 2019, there was a stretch then we released a post ourselves like the first 5 or 6 games, maybe to week 8, where he was getting up a quarterback rating of 99 when being targeted. He dropped it down over the second half of the season, played well. In 2020, 85.3. That's not bad. That's really solid. He only gave up 3 TDs. He only gave up 7.9 yards per target. And the completion percentage was he gave up 13.6 yards of completion, and he only allowed a completion percentage on himself at a 57.7%, down from 65% in 2019. So Levi Wallace improved last year. He definitely improved in all facets of the game. So that's why I say sometimes we get into our fandom and we look at things and we want everybody to be an all-pro. Yes, it would be great to have Casey Hayward or Jair Alexander or someone that such player across Trey White. But financially, it's damn near impossible to do because cornerback in an expensive position. And if you pay 2 cornerbacks, that means you're probably not paying something. So you're not paying a Stephon Diggs, or you're not paying a Jerry Hughes or Gregory Rousseau in the future, or possibly you're not paying a Deion Dawkins or Darrell Williams. Now you're not protecting your franchise quarterback. It also comes down to money allocation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, money allocation has a lot to do with how these teams structure what they do in the future and in the short term. Yeah, this position, it's definitely been one of the most polarizing in this offseason. I was really happy to talk about it. I'm excited to see what's going to transpire. I'm excited to see what the Bills' defense is going to look like. I'm hoping to see a revamped pass rush. And personally, I'm excited to see what Dane Jackson can bring to the table because we saw only limited action last season, and he could really be a star. And I think he has a lot of potential. And you hear nothing but good things about him from his coaches, from the front office, and from people around him. And that's indicative of a good football player in my mind. And yeah. Guys, this was fun. Another segment on the Cold Front Report. James, tell the people where they can find you if they choose to.
All right. One name I wanted to throw in there, too, that is also a solid corner and play for us last year. Not saying he's going to be cornerback number 2 is Cam Lewis. He was not a bum. He was all right. He was all right. He was all right. People forgetting his name. He can play a little bit. But if you want to find me, Facebook, James Mallory, or you can find me on Instagram, JMAL2, JMAL2, on Twitter at NFLJMAL2. That's at NFLJMAL number 2. Thank you.
JT, tell the people where they can find you, what you got going on. You're a busy man.
I'm on Twitter. I don't go in there much. You people are crazy on there and you're volatile, and I don't have time for that type of crap. I'm not made for the media Twitter thing. A lot of people talk a lot of trash. I'm not meant for that. I show up your doorstep. But no, on Instagram, you can follow on my blog profile, the real JTM _. On Facebook, most of you guys follow me, Jerry Turner Montgomery. No, I don't got much going on right now. I've actually we sent Ernest Daniels to the CB Johnson camp today to help out there in Amherst and Buffalo. So that's pretty cool. Shout out to my man Stevie for holding it down and doing camps. He got another one tomorrow, I think, at LaSalle Park at 3. And I think he has private sessions on Monday. So he's doing his work in Buffalo. So make sure you guys check that out. Me and Dan Gambino are planning the second annual Mafia homecoming party. It's going to be at Soho Bar in Buffalo again. It's probably going to be September 10th. We're still working on getting some guests. We had some nice guests in the building last year, so stay tuned for more information about that. And we have some more things coming up with some more charities that we'll be working with the Codes and Cold Front Report. And also make sure you guys are following Avalon Media. Our guy Diver over there and Pat, they're doing a great job over there. The Moss Mode show will be starting soon. I'm kind of producer someone on that with Zach Moss. So it's a lot of things, I'm just trying to stay busy. When you stay busy, you stay out of people's business. And you stay out of trouble, unless you're money laundering, because that can get you in a lot of trouble.
That's very true. But
JT talking that talk.
can find both of these gentlemen's Twitter pages in the description below, wherever you're watching, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. There's no description on Twitter, but you can find their handles in the description below. You want to follow me, I'm also there. It's at CFR Clayton on Twitter, at CFR Clayton on Instagram. Be sure to follow us everywhere on Twitter, Instagram, like us on Facebook. That's at Cold Front Report on Twitter, at Cold Front Report _ Bills News on Instagram, and be sure to like our page on Facebook, Cold Front Report Buffalo Bills. Guys, it's been fun. You know, that it's going to be a fun season. It's going to be fun competition. Hopefully we can be there to witness it. I know the Bills are a little finicky on letting people in the door to see, but hopefully, hopefully we're the few, a couple of the chosen few that get to go in there and see what transpires.
What do you mean chosen? What are you talking about? What was chosen? What's going on?
I don't know. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean chosen though? I mean, is it take his limit or something? I'd say
it's like Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. You got
no. I know golden ticket. I got vaccinated to go to games, fully vaccinated. Now I even know what they put in me, and I don't care because I'm going to the Bills game. So no, not a chance in hell. They better let me in the building. I just got 2 shots of damn who knows what.
Hey, got the shots of the Kool-Aid. That's what it sounds like you got.
Whatever.
So, well, guys, it's been fun. Hope everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time right here on the Cold Front Report.
We out.